God's blessings to you, and we have made some new additions to the Christian Theological Library. That's the title I've given my library, the Christian Theological Library. So I wanted to highlight these for you. These are some books that have been just so profitable and helpful for me. You'll notice I think this is maybe the third video I've made. Kind of highlighting some books from my library. You'll notice, if you haven't already, that generally I like to get older Christian theology books. I just love the old classics, and there's a reason for that, which I can explain in a few minutes. But in that spirit, we've actually picked up 3 or 4 books from the works of R.B. Kuiper. Now, Kuiper, not to be confused with Abraham Kuiper. This is a different Kuiper. This is R.B. Kuiper. Kuiper comes from a lineage, his family, or his father rather, Christian lineage. His father was actually a pastor as well. And he was an immigrant from the Netherlands, came over here. They settled in what I consider to be the hub of Reformed theology, Grand Rapids, Michigan, here in the United States, where he later attended, did some of his schooling at Calvin College, and then also was a student at Westminster. But he actually went on to be a professor at Westminster Theological Seminary, and then he also, after that, became a professor towards the end of his career at what became Calvin Theological Seminary. And these are 4 just wonderful works, 4 of his books that I consider to be his best. And he was a prolific writer, R.B. Kuiper was. This one, actually Banner put this one out, and it's really a book about the communion of the saints. And it's called The Glorious Body of Christ. And again, just stressing the importance of how critical it is that the children of God fellowship together, and that body of believers, so important, because there's a general attitude that a church is a building, or a church is an institution, or a church is a religion. It's none of those things, actually. The church is people. And the church is the communion of the saints, the body of believers. So that's a great work that I'm working through. And then another one, we'll highlight 2 or 3 more from R.B. Kuiper. Another edition that I picked up, it's called To Be or Not to Be Reformed. This is a really excellent book. This, I think, came out in the early 1950s, and really peels the onion, so to speak, of what it means to be reformed. I think, again, there is this stereotypical category of what reformed Christianity is, but it goes much, much deeper than the 5 points of, it goes deeper than Tulip, it goes deeper than Calvin. It's a worldview. And so Kuiper does an excellent job of digging into this one. So that one was kind of the sequel to this one. This one's called, I believe this one's called To Be Reformed. This is a first edition. That's why it's so old looking. As to Being Reformed. Now, I haven't read that one yet, but that one, again, same type of theme. Kuiper talking about authentic, true Reformation theology. So, and then a very old Kuiper book, I think one of his first, called While the Bridegroom Tarries. And this is all about the relationship between the believer and Jesus, and what that involves. Jesus being the mediator, and Jesus being the Redeemer, and we are the bride of Christ. And so that'll go, you've heard that in Scripture, and he dives into that. So R.B. Kuiper, a big part of the added works that we've added to our library. A few other ones that we wanted to highlight and kind of do some really informal reviews on. This is a guy that not a lot of people know here in the 21st century. His name is Harry Blammers. And Harry Blammers I first became familiar with him when Donald Gray Barnhouse, or I'm sorry, not Donald Gray Barnhouse, I believe it was um, Bastian Krutoff was speaking about him in one of his sermons. A lot of times that's how I'll hear about some of these great older 19th and 20th century pastors. And he wrote a couple of books. He's got a small collection of works, but these are two of his best. This is actually a early edition of his book called On Christian Truth. Absolutely fascinating. If you really want to get into the deeper, I hate to use the word psychology, but if you want to get into the psyche of a Christian from a biblical perspective, Harry Blammers does a wonderful job with that. I highly recommend that. And then one that's even deeper, more modern than that one. This one he wrote about 3 decades later, and then it was actually published in 1980, while this edition was published in 1979 or 80, and I believe this is the 4th edition. And it is just a very fascinating read. It's kind of a deeper dive. It's really causes you to think, and it talks a little bit about the culture and the Christian's relation to the culture. Of course, you know that, scripturally, we are in the world, but we are not of the world. So he digs into that one, and he'll tell you what that means. And our relationship as Christians, how are we to conduct ourselves, but more importantly, how are we to think as Christians? I think that has become a big, big issue that Blammers noticed. There's been just a lot of, the big problem has been nominal Christians and cultural Christians. And as he says here, Christians have forgotten how to think as Christians. So this would be very, very helpful in that regard. A couple of other editions that I'm very excited about, and I've just tore through these in a hurry because they are so good. This is a book of apologetics per se. I would put this under the apologetics section. It's from Gordon H. Clark, and it's called In Defense of Theology. Now, this is the same kind of theme where he is exposing how Christians have become too nominal in the 20th century. And he's talking about 20th century Christianity, 20th century culture and society. Now, Gordon H. Clark was a philosophy professor, and Clark, but he's a Christian. Now, I wouldn't actually, I hesitate to call him a Christian philosopher. There are a lot of people who will not read his works or advocate for his works because of his affiliation with philosophy. But I'm here to tell you that absolutely should not scare you away, because he is extremely biblical. And yes, there is a subtle philosophical tone to his writing, but this particular work, In Defense of Theology, is very lucid. He makes it very accessible for the layperson. Now, he has some other works that are much deeper and more challenging and less lucid, but not this one. So if you're looking for something that you can follow, and if you're looking for a true defense of theology, why we should embrace theology as Christians and not scorn it, this is the book for you if you're wanting to know about that. And that has been a big, big problem that Clark points out, is Christians turn their nose to theology when they should be doing exactly the opposite. Now, in Reformed circles, another one we wanted to highlight is from Richard Baxter. This work is a little bit more well-known. This is the classic work from Richard Baxter, The Reformed Pastor. And you hear that word reformed, and you might be thinking, well, it's not exactly what you might think when he's talking about reformed. What Baxter means is the true character of the pastor, not necessarily doctrine or dogma, or theology, but what does reformed mean when it comes to pastoral ministry? And it really means, according to Baxter, a character that involves humility, it involves gentleness, and it involves servant leadership. And, just pausing on servant leadership for a minute, that goes beyond just the pastor. All Christians should have an attitude of servant leadership. Lay people can have that as a mantra, servant leadership. And so that's just kind of what he means by reformed. This is, I'm not sure if this is the abridged work or not. The Reformed Pastor is not a very long, lengthy treatise. It's not a huge volume, but this was one of the early copies that came out. Banner was also a publisher of this book, and they made it as one of their Puritan paperbacks. And then you could find other editions of this as well. So this is actually still in print, and just an excellent read if that's something that you might be interested in. Now, for theology geeks like me, another book that we've picked up is called, and it's from Alvin L. Baker, and this book is called Berkouwer's Doctrine of Election, Balance or Imbalance. Now, real quickly, what this book is about is G.C. Berkouwer, the great Dutch theologian, had kind of an early side to him as far as his theology and a later career side. As he got towards the later years of his career, he had sort of a liberal type of slant, unfortunately, particularly in some of his doctrinal work, some of his doctrinal views, and election was one of them. So Baker is here dissecting Berkouwer, and one great thing that I want to say about this book is he really respects Berkouwer for who he is. So this is not just a book where he's just tearing apart Berkouwer, because there are so many great things about this Dutch theologian, well known in the Reformed world. But he did get somewhat of an influence from Karl Barth. In fact, Berkouwer wrote extensively on Barth, and it's my feeling that he was influenced in a negative way when writing so much and studying so much about Karl Barth, that it kind of damaged his doctrinal understanding of election. And so this is what Baker is doing. And he does it in a very, very sophisticated and systematic way. Kind of a challenge to read if you're not used to that sort of writing. But if you really want to get to try to understand where did Berkouwer go off the rails when it came to election, this is a great one to read. There's also a lot of great biographical information on this, too. And like I said, he does, it's a very fair treatment of Berkouwer. And it's also very complimentary of Berkouwer. So, and I actually haven't finished reading this one yet, but it's excellent. And I believe that P&R Publishing, Presbyterian and Reformed Publishers, which is just one of my favorite publishers, they came out with that one. So, all right, a couple of more additions before we sign off that we have added to the library is we'll look at this rare copy of an exposition on John 17. I had to go to the UK to order this one, and this one is out of print, but the actual exposition is in the works of Thomas Manton in that 15-volume set, if you want to get this. But if you want to try to look for this one, you can do that. And I have to say, Thomas Manton is so comforting and just an unbelievable, gifted Christian writer. And this is, probably, I don't know, maybe 400 or 500 pages long, maybe even more. But it's amazing. He takes, and it's only on John 17. He takes that entire chapter and just does an amazing detailed work, verse by verse, on one of the most important chapters in the book of John, and really focuses, as you wouldn't be surprised, it focuses on the prayer life of Jesus, and particularly the prayer that he was so sincere with. Of course, there's never a time where Jesus wasn't sincere, but the days before his death, and of course, the night before his death as well, and just talking about all of that. So then a couple of more additions to the library. We've got some pink work there, the Doctrine of Sanctification and the Doctrine of Salvation, some older works from pink that we've added. And then we have added a volume from F.B. Meyer. We'll talk about that next time because that deserves a video of its own. So just wanted to add some books to the library, which is growing, and to give you some suggestions on what to pick up. Again, I really think that, not that there aren't new works out there from new authors that are worth getting, but I'm just a huge advocate of the classics, and they don't, like the old saying, they don't make them like they used to. The writers of the 17th century and beyond are just absolutely fantastic, and I highly recommend them. So thanks for checking in. We'll put this video on the board for the subscribers, and if you like this kind of stuff, feel free to click subscribe, because there definitely will be more videos coming as we feel like adding and highlighting and reviewing more great Christian theology books. Let me just finish by saying that these books, as I've said before, you can't find these kinds of books in today's brick and mortar bookstores. If you go into the Christian section of today's bookstores, you're going to find heresy. So they might as well just call it the heresy section. You'll find a lot of false gospel. So no false gospel or heresy in this library. Maybe one or two books just to take a peek, but other than that, you're not going to find any of that in our library. So thanks for checking us out. God's blessings to you.